What is the cost of becoming yourself? For some, it's a quiet negotiation. For others, it is a battle waged in public, under the harshest of lights. And for Raquel Willis, it is the very risk that defines a legacy.
In 2025, Time magazine named its 100 most influential people. Alongside the familiar faces of power stood an architect of a different kind. Honored as a Woman of the Year, Raquel Willis wasn't just trending for an award, she was trending for embodying one of the most urgent questions of our time. In a world that seeks to erase you, how do you build a future?
Her memoir, The Risk It Takes to Bloom, is more than a bestseller. It's a blueprint, a story that begins not on a global stage, but in the suffocating silence of a child's heart in Augusta, Georgia. This is the story of how a person transforms ostracization into influence, and why her voice, at this exact moment, has become the one we cannot afford to ignore. Born in the early 90s into a devout Catholic family, Raquel's childhood was built on service and faith. But inside the dutiful child, another self was suffocating. It was a silence so loud it screamed. Reflectively, a profound dislocation from the boy everyone saw. Firmly, this wasn't confusion. It was a deep, isolating ache in a world that offered no words, no mirrors, for the woman she knew she was. School was not a refuge. It was a daily gauntlet of hostility. As a teenager, she took a breath and stepped into a partial truth, coming out as gay. It offered a fragile peace, a temporary shield. But the real war was still to come. At the University of Georgia, that war escalated. The harassment for being gender nonconforming was relentless, a constant, grinding pressure. But pressure doesn't just crush. It can create diamonds. The hostility became a catalyst, forcing a confrontation she could no longer postpone. The realization, I am a trans woman, was not a gentle sunrise. It was a tectonic shift, a terrifying, liberating earthquake that shattered her world only to rebuild it on a foundation of truth. From that moment, her survival and her activism became one. She began organizing, fighting the very discrimination that targeted her, determined to carve a safer path for others. In 2013, she graduated with a degree in journalism, holding the one weapon she believed could truly change the world: the story. Armed with her degree, Willis began the meticulous work of building a platform. She wrote for BuzzFeed, for the Huffington Post, chiseling out a space for a voice the mainstream had long ignored. But she wasn't content to just write from the margins. In December 2018, she took a sledgehammer to a glass ceiling. As the new executive editor of Out magazine, Raquel Willis became the first Black transgender woman to lead a major U.S. publication. It was a historic leap from the front lines of reporting to the heart of the institution. And from that seat of power, she would launch the project that would sear her name into the national conscience. In 2019, Willis unveiled the Trans Obituaries Project. It was a memorial, a protest, and an act of radical empathy. In an era of escalating violence, she refused to let trans women be reduced to statistics. For Willis, every story was a mirror. Each interview with a grieving family was a confrontation with a life that could have been hers. This wasn't journalism. It was bearing witness. It was a sacred act of reclaiming souls from the headlines. The project was a gut punch. It won a GLAAD Media Award in 2020, but its true victory was in its impact. It forced a nation to look, to feel, and to understand that these were not just names on a list. They were daughters, friends, lovers, and their loss would no longer be silent. Having honored the dead, Willis dedicated herself to fortifying the living. In June 2020, she became the Director of Communications for the EMS Foundation for Women, weaving the struggles for racial justice, gender equality, and trans liberation into a single, unbreakable cord. Her influence accelerated. She co-founded the Transgender Week of Visibility and Action and the Gender Liberation Movement, a collective demanding a fundamental shift in how we understand our own bodies. She was no longer just telling the story. She was changing the conditions in which the story is lived. Then, in November 2023, she published The Risk It Takes to Bloom. The memoir was a revelation, laying bare the personal cost of her public fight. In it, she writes, "I realized that my story was not just my own. It was a reflection of a larger struggle for visibility and justice." This is the heart of why Raquel Willis defines this moment. The book's release and the monumental recognition from Time in 2025 marks the point where her personal journey and our collective reckoning converged. At a time when the very rights she champions are under relentless assault, her story became a rallying cry. She says the child, the teenager, the young activist, they all still live inside her, a council of advisors forged in fire. It is this complex humanity, this dialogue between her private pain and her public power that makes her voice so resonant. She is an activist, yes, but more, she is a survivor who has metabolized her trauma into a blueprint for liberation. Raquel Willis's legacy is not a monument to be observed. It is a construction site with work happening in real time. Through Black trans circles, she creates spaces for Black trans women to heal and lead. Through her podcast Afterlives, she continues the sacred work of remembrance. She argues powerfully that the fight for bodily autonomy, whether for reproductive rights or trans rights, is the same fight. From the bullied child in Augusta to the stage of the Women's March, from a pioneering editor to a Time 100 honoree, her journey is a masterclass in resilience. But she teaches us that resilience is not about building thicker walls. It's about having the courage to tear them down and plant a garden in their place. Raquel Willis is trending because her story holds a mirror to our own. It is about the risk it takes to be seen, the power it takes to demand a better world, and the grace it takes to bloom against all odds. Her story is not an endpoint. It is an invitation. The architect has drawn the plans. The work of building a liberated world is ours to continue.